Thanks. Well, glad to see you all here. Jessica, I have you beat for how long ago the time in Japan was because mine's actually in the previous century. So I was in Hokkaido 93 to 96. My town no longer exists. It got smushed in with the other town that I visited there, but right on Lake Toya, beautiful area. Really glad to be here with you all tonight. I have done a bunch of these presentations. Throw all of your questions around career transitions, et cetera, at me. There are a couple that came in advance of this session today, and I want to be sure that we cover those as well as our other topics. But I will have Kristy introduce herself, and then we can go get started on our fabulous presentation.
Awesome. Thanks for kicking us off, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristy. I'm currently in the Monterey County area. I just finished up work. My day job is actually the program director at an organization called VIA Programs, where I host 10-day immersion programs in the SF Bay Area for students, young professionals from Asia. And a lot of our work is in like Japan and Hong Kong, and Thailand actually is where a lot of our folks come from. And so it's been a really interesting experience working there. I got the job through the JET alumni Facebook page for JETA NC. And it's just a really interesting way. I can talk about it later in the breakout rooms, but just it's been interesting to see how my career path has definitely never left Japan, even though I physically left in 2020. And just want to share a little bit more about that later. But I'm just really curious. I'm reading some of the answers on the Padlet right now. I love that folks are coming in at all different stages of the career journey. So go ahead and take a look actually at, who else is in the room on this Padlet. I think it gives a good idea of why you're all here, which will be helpful for breakout rooms, but also just to give you a sense that like we're all coming in at different points in our career, but at the end of the day, having these conversations, just you being here is actually like a huge step in the right direction. So I'm so happy that all of you are here today. I'm just going to take a minute to read through this with you all. And I think the one tip I'll say for today's chat is definitely speak out if you have a question, because I think Emily and we do have, some slides, but as far as flow and everything goes, this is a good time to ask any questions that pop up as we're chatting. So I encourage you all to ask questions. Yeah.
And for those of you who are saying things about career direction that makes sense to me, finding out where I want to go, finding direction, I feel you. I've been there, so we'll get into some of that when we give our presentation as well, and you can connect with us after the session, or you can connect with us now as well.
Kristy, let me know when you're ready to move from the
I think we're ready.
Okay.
Emily, you good? Yeah, we can.
All right, great. Let me pull it up and get it ready. All right. Okay, here we go.
Right. So glad to have you, and we are gonna get right into all of our stuff here. So if you would scooch us forward here a bit, Jessica. There's us. You can tell my photo is old because in the before times I was in person and I didn't need the blue light filter of my glasses. I need new headshots. Anyway, here's us. Please reach out to us. Our contact info we're going to share with you for sure. You can also, if you want Kristy's contact information, you can grab the QR code on her screen there as well. But we're definitely excited to connect with you and to chat with you. And we will start with just kind of a quick overview of our agenda here. So, as Jessica mentioned, this is kind of what it's going to look like. There are definitely some peculiarities in the job search these days, and we will definitely talk through them a little bit. Anything you want to add here to this slide, Kristy?
No, thank you.
All right. All right. Done that. All right. So we wanted to start you off with some basic top 3 tips here. So one of the things I see a lot is that people will come back from Japan and get really stuck in this place of, well, I speak some Japanese and I know some Japanese culture, therefore I should look for these kinds of jobs. So we really want to encourage you to start off to really think about your values and your interests instead of just your skills. Your skills are obviously important, and I know how hard it is to learn Japanese, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for you to kind of try to cram yourself into a role that isn't going to fit. When I first got back from Japan, one of the things I did early on was I tried some translation work. And turns out I hate translation work. Also, it was at a law firm, and the lawsuit was about rubber patent infringement. So that was also not a fabulous fit. But I was over focused on my skills, and I was doing that work at the expense of my values. So we're really going to kind of push you in the direction of who you are a little bit more than what you can do. Kristy?
And so,
sorry.
yeah, I mean, just a continuation of what
Yes.
Emily is sharing. These are just, people ask like why. So this is just a note for you to have. You'll have the chance to have these slides at the end of today. But something that we're going to do today is actually give you a chance to sit for like 3 minutes. I know it's not a lot of time, but just give yourself 3 minutes to pull out a piece of paper, or you can jot it in your notes on your phone or your computer and actually think about what values you care about in what you're doing. So, like Emily said, a lot of us focus on the job description and what are the skills that I can actually present myself with in an interview or even as I'm networking. But one thing that I notice when I'm networking with folks is regardless of what job they're doing or what kind of industry this person's in, I always tend to notice, like, do I connect with them on a personal level? And although we don't, introduce ourselves saying like, oh, hi, I'm Kristy. One of my values is trust and integrity. Like, that's a little awkward, but knowing what you value is critical, and you can work in these values in the interview questions when you're talking to somebody or when you're just casually getting a coffee chat with someone as you're networking. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to prompt you to write down 5 top values that you have. And sometimes people, if you get stuck and you're like, okay, well, I don't know, maybe there's a professional me, and then there's a personal me. Just in general, think about your top 5 values. And if it's difficult, a couple of questions or statements you could think about are like, what are qualities you look for in your best friends or people that you enjoy being around, people that you admire? Because a lot of times you share the same qualities and values. And think about even what you valued when you were younger. It might seem a little bit far-fetched and removed, but oftentimes what we value today is just a kind of like evolved version of what we cared about as a kid. So you can always think back to that. So on the next slide, we're going to show you a list of words that people use as values. Again, it's an expansive list. This is just a few words to jog your thoughts. And Emily, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, don't be worried if what you're writing down for values seem like they may be frivolous, or maybe are things that you feel like you shouldn't have as values. For instance, if one of your top values is something like making a lot of money, but that feels like you're not supposed to want that, it doesn't make you a bad person. That's not the only thing you value. It's a reflection of kind of what's going on in your life at the moment. So don't worry about the sort of value of your values. Nobody else is measuring them. And these are things that are simply important to you as an individual.
Just if we go to the next slide. Thank you. And then while we have it here, I'm gonna set a timer for like 3 minutes, but maybe Emily and we could share what our top values are too while they're
Yeah.
waiting.
Definitely, definitely. So, as you all may guess, because I'm self-employed, autonomy and independence absolutely always top my list. I have always semi-joked, but it's also kind of true that my default setting is you are not the boss of me, which is problematic when I have a boss. So, this is a really good space for me to be in. That one always tops it for me. Creativity is also really key for me, and diversity. Those are the ones that really tend to come in tops for me. There's some others that are important as well, but without those three, I can't really make a go of things. How about you, Kristy?
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. For me, a lot of it actually kind of changed in 2020
Yeah.
when I was laid off during the pandemic. There were a couple of things that became really strong values for me. And one of the things that is similar to yours, I think for me, freedom. Freedom for me is like being financially free, but also freedom of time. Um, I've never had a 9 to 5 job. Like in recruitment, it was kind of like a 24/7 job. The JET program was the closest thing to having like a 9 to 5. And what I do now, I set my own times, and I'm never going to take a job that doesn't line up with my value of freedom when it comes to time and financial freedom. And also this like, I think the other one for me is in a weird way, like loyalty. I know in this day and age, it's not always the case where you can depend on your employer to be your employer no matter what. If anything, it's a little bit of a rocky environment, especially like in the tech industry right now. But loyalty, even to myself, I think is really important. So that's just like keeping my time boundaries, keeping my health and wellness at the forefront. So loyalty in this case doesn't necessarily mean that it's attached to the company or the place I want to go to, but this is more like something that I care about. So my colleagues all are very much self-centering and respecting their own boundaries. And I appreciate that because it helps me do that. And one example too of like taking care of yourself and just not completely overworking is like my boss takes like at least 2 or 3 personal trips a year. The last one he took was to hike Kilimanjaro for like 5 days, and I was like, wow, okay. So if you work in a place where people are demonstrating values that you care about, it just helps you continue to be the person that you want to be, which will make you inherently enjoy your work more, and you'll be more in alignment with your career. So this is why we're asking you all to think about your values over skills.
And by the way, feel free to define these for yourself as well, because what, for instance, a growth mindset means to me might not be the same thing that it means to you. So your values, so you get to define these things. How are we doing on time?
We are definitely at 3 minutes, so
All right.
gonna move on to tip number 2. So bring a big chair to the table. Basically, that means it translates to show up confidently, regardless of what situation you are entering when it comes to your career, when it comes to networking, when it comes to interviewing. and chatting with new people who maybe don't know you that well yet. It's something that seems obvious, but I'm going to share one more thing after this. Actually, can you hit the next? Yeah, so there's another thing that happens when we're looking at people online and maybe we want to reach out, and we see people's job titles and years of experience and like the company that they work for, the university that they went to. And it creates almost like Instagram creates this like kind of avatar profile of somebody who we can imagine who they are, but we've never actually met them. The same thing happens with LinkedIn a lot of times, and we think we're going to meet this spectacular human who has done all things that we want to do, and we want to learn about that and do the same thing. And then you meet them, and it's not necessarily, you know, the person that you put on the pedestal as you were looking at their LinkedIn. So bringing your confidence and also removing anyone from a pedestal if you have put them on one at some point. And I've done this so many times. That's why I talk about it, because it's just so, well, for me, it's not been the case that people matched my bias that I had of them. And it served me well to not put people on a pedestal. Emily, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just second it. I mean, technically, I'm a CEO. I run my own business. I make all of the decisions around it. I am so not fancy. And honest truth right now, I am wearing sweatpants, but you can't see them. So don't be intimidated. People are, I promise, either going to ignore your request altogether, in which case you won't know what's going on in their heads, or they're going to be really nice. So reach out to people. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
All right. So one other thing to think about too, and how you can show up confidently, it's in a small, people talk about body language and they also talk about language, like the verbal language that you use when you talk about yourself. So I'm going to show you an example of something that I used to say a lot. So Jessica, if you can, yeah, perfect. So when we meet someone new, right, and sometimes we'll say, oh, like, so nice to meet you. I don't want to take up too much of your valuable time, or thanks so much for making time for me in your busy schedule. I had this on autopilot, like as a just a greeting when I talk to people, especially when I was job hunting, which sounds nice, but as I'm noting here, like it really devalues your own time and self-worth when you're saying things like this. So what you could say is, I'm happy we both are able to exchange and talk about our experiences, which means you're at a level playing field. Again, big chair at the table. Or especially when it comes to folks who are like, they have a schedule, you have a schedule. It's not just that they're busy, but you also need to respect your own time when you're having these conversations. Sometimes it's really helpful in LinkedIn, especially to say in a message like, or in person, I have 30 minutes to talk. Does your schedule align with this? Which is a different way of saying, like, do you have time? Again, these are basic and very simple language changes that can immediately give you more perceived confidence, and perceived competence or confidence equals higher perceived competence. That's just the way the world works when it comes to speaking to folks. But there's nothing that you change about yourself. It's just the words that you use to talk with other people.
Yeah. Did you all see the Barbie movie? I know that's a little bit silly, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Did you all see the Barbie movie? So here's the thing, right? Back to what Kristy is saying. There's a part at the very beginning when the author Barbie is receiving an award for her book, and she says, I worked really hard for this, so I deserve it. And I think we just all need to bring a little piece of that specific Barbie energy into our lives. You've worked really hard. You have really great skills. You deserve to make these connections, and you have a lot to offer the world. All right. So since I'm already yakking, let me talk to you about identifying good connections. So we talk a lot about networking. Don't worry if the word intimidates you. Networking, as Jessica actually always has a really good thing about networking. She says it's just meeting cool people that you think you might want to be friends with, which I think is a lovely way to put it. networking doesn't have to be scary, but when you are building these connections, do really focus on who the folks are who are going to be helpful to you. You can do things like we have here about kind of seeking people with similar values. You can talk to people who are already in circles that you inhabit. Jet Network is a really, really great place to start because we all already have so much in common. So things like this are really, really good places to start. I know Kristy will have more to say about this as well.
Awesome. And we'll go into this actually a lot more in the second part of this conversation. But one thing to recognize is that anyone who's here really already has a global network. So there, even if it doesn't, it's not someone that comes to mind immediately, you'd be surprised to know that you already have people within like 2 to 3 degrees separation of your current network of people. And by network, I mean like family and friends circle, or like friends of friends. Within that network already, you have so many opportunities to have conversations around things that you're interested in, or things that you might want to do together that could lead to a conversation that circles in somebody who's actually connected to the next place you're going to work. So just noticing that. Also, the mindset around networking. I specifically wrote like identify good connections because usually actually people will check out depending on their relationship at networking events. If networking feels icky, feels like almost like greedy, like people just want to talk to you and get something from you. There are so many different ways that we experience networking, and all of them are valid. It's just that you can benefit from changing the mindset and letting go of certain habits and judgments that we have around it, because it will benefit you long term, and not just you, but it'll also help other people because they'll have the chance to tap into your knowledge and the things that you bring to the table. So identifying good connections is our third top tip that we have for you all tonight. And to just further emphasize that point, we have a good crowd in the Zoom chat room today. And so Emily and I are going to challenge you all to, I know you haven't had breakout rooms yet, but even so, typically most people have a name listed on their Zoom like image here. And so one of the challenges we'd like you to try is actually choose and identify somebody from today's group to connect with. And you all know how to message each other on the chat, keeping it obviously knowing that this is a safe space. This is truly just a place where you can actually try learning how to connect with other folks within your network, regardless of what the job title is or what the industry this person is working in. And I say that because just because the person may not have the same job trajectory as you doesn't mean they don't know somebody who could be in line with a conversation that you could have. So I always like to say, yeah, you never know where the conversation could go. Emily, did you want to?
And yeah, absolutely. The other thing to think about as you're thinking about connections here from this presentation, also remember that one of the things you all can do for each other is be accountability buddies. So if you need someone to kind of walk through this job search process with you, absolutely, that's a wonderful person to connect with. I think you'll get a little bit more of a sense of that when we do have our breakouts, because we'll have more of a free-flowing conversation at that point. But don't be scared. This is a really nice group of people. Even when you find people who are super, super fancy sounding, but have a jet connection with you, they're going to be willing to talk to you.
Awesome. So I just encourage you all. I mean, again, if you're comfortable and you're willing to connect with folks, go ahead and drop in your LinkedIn profile, or if you're comfortable just putting your email out there so that people can connect with you. I'll do the same in the chat as well. And for those of you who don't have LinkedIn, I'll go over a little bit more about that in the in the next part of this.
All right, you ready to get some tips on networking? All right, we're gonna hop on in. So it used to be pre-pandemic that if you were gonna network, you were gonna have to actually go physically out to a place and talk to people. And you still can. That is still valuable. I'm going to talk a bit more about in-person networking, but we are also hyper connected to each other now. That Kristy's going to give us a lot of really good information about how we do this networking thing online, especially if you're doing it kind of exclusively or primarily in online spaces. It can feel a little bit awkward. It doesn't have to. And among other things, I can promise you that if you're feeling a little bit awkward, the folks you're having conversation with are as well. We're not super wired to view human beings as thirds of people in little boxes. So there's a little degree of kind of oddness to it. All right, let's jump in and talk about in-person networking a little bit more. All right, so we keep harping on the don't be afraid thing. There's a reason for it, okay? We don't mean to be projecting fear on you all, but years and years ago, I actually did a presentation at a career workshop in Florida for JET program. And they had a bunch of folks come in to talk who were pretty die senpai. There were like some people who were kind of, when it was pre-JET, there were some people who had really impressive job titles. They had heads of manufacturing companies and, just lots and lots of people. And so we said, hey, go network with each other. And what happened was all of the fairly recent returnees stood in one corner and all of the everybody else's stood in the other corner. And I actually finally, well, this is silly. And so I actually went around to the recent JET returnees and grabbed them physically and said, go talk to that person, go talk to that person. They were so intimidated that they weren't doing the networking. But it was a networking event. We were all there specifically for that purpose. So don't freak yourself out. We all have those moments of feeling like imposters. We all have those crises of confidence. But these are just people. These are people who have interesting experiences. You also have interesting experiences. Shake it off a little bit. Have some fun. These events can be a little bit overwhelming, but that is why you so often will get drinks tokens at these events. They're trying to get you to relax a little bit. So do just kind of dive in. Try to get as comfortable as you can in these situations. I will say if you're going to an in-person networking event and you know a little bit about who is going to be there, or if there's a particular focus that the group has, jot down either a list of some of the kinds of people you would like to meet or some of the questions you might have for the people you do interact with. And these can be very kind of basic starter questions so that if you find yourself sitting at a table full of strangers, you have a way to get the conversation going. Kind of personal icebreakers. And those, you can get really creative with those if you want. You can have those things like, what is one thing you want to get out of this evening's event? Those kinds of questions. Or you can go super old school. Hey, I'm glad to share a table with you. What do you do when you're not at a networking event? If you get super unclear about these things, you can even have little small talk about the space you're in or the food they're serving or whatever it is. So jot down just some of these kind of basic icebreakers for yourself for these events. Once you get talking, it's going to be easier. Have we harped on JET being a good connection for you yet? So really do embrace these spaces. Like I said earlier, we all already have so much in common in a way that you won't necessarily find in your daily life, right? We are the people who, at some point after college, thought, yes, you know what? I would like to uproot my entire life, go live in another country where I may or may not already speak the language, and I don't know, translate or teach kids some stuff. Sure, that sounds good. This is kind of a lot of stuff we have in common with each other. So already this is a very friendly group. So do look at those connections like US Jet AA and your local Jet AA chapters. Really great ways to meet people who are wired a little bit like you. Also, just find people who seem interesting to you. Kristy is going to talk a lot more about finding people on LinkedIn and connecting with them there. But don't forget that you have other networks that you can use, like your university alumni network, like friends and family, like people you worked with before you did JET, your college professors, anyone who's already somehow in your orbit can potentially be a really, really good connection for you. I'm also a big fan of things like professional associations. So if you want to maintain a sort of connection somehow with Japan, whether or not you want it to be your professional circles, check out things like Japan America societies. Look for chambers of commerce. I'll warn you that depending on where you are and what the chambers of commerce are in your area, they may be prohibitively expensive for you to join as an individual, but you can still see what their events are. And typically you can attend their events as well. You'll just pay a slightly higher fee than the members will for the event. So check those out. If you have a specific type of career path you want to get into, you can look at joining the professional associations. There are many, many of those. And you can just do a quick Google search. So you could, look for professional association organizers or professional association dental hygienists. Look for those kinds of things and you'll find them. And if you don't want to risk spending money on an actual membership, join the group on social media and you'll still get a bunch of their content. And you'll also get announcements of things like events that they're having. When you're at these events, do be sure you're mindful about getting copies of people's business cards. And if there's space on their card and you want to jog your memory about who that person was, jot down a quick note on the card so that you can remember what it is. On that note, I'm going to give you a piece of sort of unpopular advice, which is this. When you get your own business cards printed up, which you should, you all come from a Meiji culture for at least 1 year, get some cards printed up for yourself and consider having a headshot put on your card. This is not to show everyone how super cute you are. I promise. It doesn't have to feel weird and creepy. It's because we're face oriented, all of us. It's a human thing. If they get your card and they think, who the heck was this? But there's a little picture of you on there, they're going to say, oh, it's that really nice person that I was talking to in line for the shish kebabs. Okay, great. I definitely want to connect with that person, right? Consider it. It is really cheap to get decent business cards printed up for yourself. You can go crazy. You can get really fancy ones. You can get just super basic ones for really cheap. Just get some printed. What you'll need on there is really your contact information. You can have a QR code that directs them right to your LinkedIn profile. And then if you want to give yourself a title or an aspirational title, you can do that. Note of caution, you'll figure this out, of course, but just don't put anything that's legally protected in there. So you can't call yourself an attorney unless you're an attorney. You can't call yourself a surgeon unless you're a surgeon. So anything else, pretty much fair game. So do be sure you do that. And then after the event, since you've taken your careful notes on the business cards, do be sure you follow up. It can be just a quick note. Hey, thanks again for connecting with me at last night's event. I really enjoyed talking with you about whatever, your cat, about what you do for a living, whatever it is you talked about, just be sure you are doing that follow-up. All right, next slide.
All right, thank you, Emily. There's a lot that I might be saying some similar things that Emily also mentioned, especially with follow-up, but I'm gonna gear us now towards the online platform, the internet, where we meet a lot of people. And I saw in the chat that at least 13 of us here, maybe more, have already created a LinkedIn account. I wrote good for most here on the slide because there are certain industries where you won't find a majority of the professionals on LinkedIn. However, in my personal experience, about, I would say, 80% of the folks that I've worked with, the industries that they're in are you can find people from your industry on LinkedIn. And so some of you are already ahead of the game, or maybe you've created one, but you don't actually use it that much unless you're job hunting, which is the case for most people. I have a different experience because I was a recruiter, and a LinkedIn account is basically the gateway to meeting people as a recruiter and vice versa. If you are out there looking for a job, recruiters are not awful people. If you find the right one, they can actually be your ticket to a really great job opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten if you were just searching the web, because not every position is listed online. So LinkedIn's great for all intents and purposes. And attending online events and seminars is also a great way to connect with people online, regardless of what industry you're in. And I'm going to share a couple of the organizations and online things that I joined when I first came back. But in general, online events are what I consider a very like a soft networking experience. So you're in the comfort of wherever you're existing physically. However, there are touch points happening in front of you, like right now. We're all connected at this moment. We can see each other. Some of us, we're just seeing other people's faces, but you're really in a good position to start conversations and just connecting with folks and carrying on that conversation outside of the event is something I'll talk about later, but it's incredibly significant, and it also could be nothing. So it just depends, who you meet at the event. I wouldn't throw all your eggs in one basket and say, I'm expecting to meet like 10 new people. I typically would say if you can meet 1 to 2 folks after an online event, you've really hit the jackpot. And if you don't at all, then at least you showed up and somebody saw who you were, and maybe they're actually interested in talking to you. So it goes both ways whenever you're out there networking online. A couple of the organizations that I fell upon through other people that I was connecting with, just to let you know how I got into like Toastmasters and all these other organizations. When I first came back, it was June 2020. Most people were not hiring. If anything, they were laying the recruitment teams off or like putting them on hiring freeze. And that's the industry that I was in when I came back. And I decided to just message and connect with as many people that I hadn't talked to for 4 years. I lived in Japan for 4 years, 2 years on jet, and then 2 years as a recruiter. And so when I came back to the States, I felt like a fresh grad out of college because I had never had a professional job in the United States. And I was 26 at the time. And so I just reached out to folks. Friends were already working. Other friends were finishing grad school, like whether that's med school or law school. Everyone was, like coming up to this culmination of like, okay, next step in life. And I was like, hi, I just got back. How have you been for 4 years? I connected with 300 people online over the course of like that first year that I was back. I don't recommend that high of a number of people, but I really was trying to just touch bases with folks locally. And through those conversations, I was connected with Toastmasters, which was interesting because they have a bilingual Toastmasters in Japanese and English. And if anyone is interested in connecting to that group, you don't have to be from the Silicon Valley. It's online. So it's a really great way to continue your Japanese. And I will say they're pretty strict. So like if you really want your Japanese, how do I say, properly evaluated, they will go like word by word. It's really fascinating. So it was a really interesting experience for me to be there, not just work on my speaking skills and connecting skills, but also there was that bilingual element. So that was a unique Toastmasters group. And I found my first coaching client through that organization as well. Emily mentioned the Japan America Societies. I'm a big fan of that organization. Before I went on Jet, I was actually interning at the organization. And so they have deep roots in certain communities where the jazz exists. And so their online events, sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're free, depending on if you have a membership or not. So when they do have free events, or if you know someone and you'd like to volunteer, there are certain ways to get tickets to things that are unpaid. So if you have any questions about that, I can definitely talk about that later. And also taking an online course. I signed up for an online course. I did not finish the online course. However, I signed up for a diversity and inclusion in HR, like Cornell online course. I didn't realize it was all virtual and there wasn't really a time to actually talk to professors. So be careful when you're looking for online courses, especially if they're expensive. However, something that was really interesting was that I was required for a project to reach out to people who were in the industry, basically. And it gave me, not to say you can't just reach out on your own, but it did give me an extra buffer of like space to say, hi, like, yes, this is a cold message. However, I'm working on my like DNI HR certificate at Cornell University, and I'd love to, ask you some questions as an industry leader. And so I reached out to somebody who was working at Meta at the time. He's the global HR head, also part of the Japanese American community. So there were some mutual connections, and we ended up connecting, and he's now a speaker for the program that I run in my day job as a program director. And so an online course can lead to connection, which can lead to other things. Could also lead to connecting with your future employer. So there are so many different ways that you can connect with folks online. And similar, I also have done this too, which again, depending on your comfort level, you may or may not want to do this. However, people will love to hear updates from you. And I really like receiving updates from friends, even if they're like not even like friends I talk to all the time, like just once a year or every, couple years, you send a little update like, hey, like I'm back in the States, or it's been a few years since I've been back. I just want to update y'all on what I'm doing. If you happen to know anyone in this industry, would love to connect. It is really refreshing to be able to share, but also just to hear from friends as well. And so I've actually done that in the past, and it's led to like interesting connections after that. So if we could move to the next slide. Also, if anyone has questions, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. One thing I just wanted to preface too is like when you are trying to create a presence online, there are certain tips that I tell people in general. You can read this. I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically I follow leaders and profiles. So like click the plus button, and if you just follow their content, you actually will start to see job postings, you'll see other people they're interacting with, and it'll lead you in the right direction if you have an idea of where you're going, or if you have a couple industry career jobs that you're focusing on. Interacting with the content on LinkedIn is not everyone's favorite thing to do, but honestly, it actually goes a long way if you can engage in at least the companies and the people that work at the companies that you're interested in working at. It just puts your name on the map. And it's helpful when you do try to make that connect on LinkedIn because they've seen your name. They're like, oh, this is the person that always supports this work. Yeah, okay, like I'm definitely gonna open up my inbox and like be like, hey, how are you doing? So there's also a way to do this without commenting. You can just repost what other people are sharing that you find is interesting. I do this quite a bit. If anyone's connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll see me post things that I like jobs in Japan, or you like jet related alumni things. And that just allows you to have more exposure online if you're trying to get noticed by people, but you're not actually physically like in a room networking. And one thing that I've done for other things in my life, but creating a separate job for if you are looking for like listservs and you're wanting to field, from a job hunting website, using a separate email can be helpful to sort out all the messages, especially if you're working with a recruiter. You might want to give them like a different email because sometimes you'll get a lot of spam, or they'll put you on like a mailing list for their agency. So just something to think about for decluttering your inbox if you're online networking.
Just make sure you're checking it. It's a
Yeah.
terrible, terrible feeling to get an email that says, "Are you available for an interview?" and the dates are last week.
Yes. This, I think, I'm not sure that you'll have these on the slides. But basically I have a video on how you can search folks through LinkedIn by keyword, by region. And I want to show you also that if you look here at the result number, it says, like right now it says 586, but there are actually so many people that you can connect with on LinkedIn by second or third degree connection, depending on if they allow those types of messages. You can see not everyone has the connect button, so not everyone can be accessed through LinkedIn. But if we go to the next slide, you can also search for organizations and companies and then find and identify somebody through the organization or company who you want to reach out to. So it's not just by searching for people that have titles. In this way, you can search through a specific industry or something that you're looking for. Seems basic, but you'd be surprised like how many people don't actually use this this feature, and it's very helpful. So the next slide will show a little bit about how I engage with folks online. You could see this through LinkedIn if you go to my profile and you click on activity, but I just wanted to show you what examples look like of how I engage with folks online. It's small messages. Sometimes I do let people know that I'm open to working and supporting what they're working on. I've helped, right now we're at 3, but there have been 3 people I've worked with who I tagged their name in a post from a recruiter online, and they actually ended up getting a job at the company. Sometimes it wasn't the exact role that I tagged them for, but I just put @Mark. If Emily was looking for a job, I put, "Hey, Emily, I think this is a really great role for you. You should reach out to this recruiter." The recruiter saw it, and the person ended up getting a job there. Obviously, it wasn't like not within like 2 weeks. It took a few months, but that conversation started on LinkedIn. And so for me, it's been very effective and helpful for my own journey, but also for clients that I help in their career search. And the last thing for folks who are connecting, just a reminder that the notes matter, especially for me. I don't accept any LinkedIn requests without a note. Not because I'm picky, I just don't remember. So if you don't leave a note, kind of like Emily said, like in your emails to folks as a follow-up, just note something that the person can remember your conversation by. It doesn't have to be about work. It just is about the conversation. Because the worst thing that can happen is if you go out networking or you want to connect with somebody and then you just don't remember like what you talked about. So it's also helpful for you to have a note of what you talked about. I recommend this, especially if you want to connect with me after this call. I won't know if it's you from this event, so put in a note that you came. And I think that's all my videos for LinkedIn for.
So thank you so much for coming, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your evening.
Thanks so much. Hope to see you all soon.